The moon's magnetic field defies evolutionary theories, evolutionism in the schools, and an extended play version of the mailbag. This is Genesis Week. Welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the Origins controversy, made possible by the supporters of Core Ottawa, Citizens for Origins Research and Education, and of course carried on the Christianima Network, christianima.com, Christian cinema at its finest. Excellence in Pirate Broadcasting, we answer your questions and question your answers. We continue to bring you the information the anti-creationists don't want you to see or hear, and giving glory to our Creator while doing it. The Bible does not talk about being united in our mindlessness, but rather God gave you an intelligently designed brain for a reason. Remember, if you get lost in cyberspace, you can just punch in wazulu.com or genesisweek.com and you can find us. And also subscribe to our YouTube channel to get extras like Crevo rants and full interviews with our guests. I'm your host, Ian Juby. A paper out in the May 6th edition of PNAS reveals details on the surprisingly strong magnetic field of the moon in the past. Now, like Earth's magnetic field, the moon did also have a magnetic field at one point, although it does not now. Using the ever so reliable potassium-argon dating methods, Suave et al. Came to several surprise conclusions. That the moon's magnetic field stuck around for much longer than they originally thought, and as a result, the researchers are proposing a new dynamo model for the moon's magnetic field. But in order for that model to work, the moon needs to have been much closer to Earth in the past. Now, those of you longtime viewers will immediately recognize several points here we've discussed in great detail on this show in the past. So, let's break it down into pieces and then review a few things. You'll recall my interview with Spike Viserys in episode 7, and in our Getting Mooned episode, number 14 of season 1, we discussed the theories of the formation of the moon. Earth was supposed to have coalesced into a ball of semi-molten rock, which was then impacted by another large body, which basically knocked off a chunk of Earth, and that chunk became the moon. Now, there are numerous problems with this theory, as we discussed in those past episodes, such as the high quantities of water found in the moon rocks. In fact, this little problem was reiterated again this past week with another paper in Science magazine discussing the water and its implications for the impact theory of the moon's formation. That water should have been vaporized and lost if the moon was formed from an impact, as one of the researchers admitted in a dialogue with the Daily Mail. The impact somehow didn't cause all the water to be lost, Sale said, but we don't know what that process would be. Meanwhile, the creation model would posit that the moon did not ever need to be in a molten state, so there is no need to explain the water content. Also, as we pointed out in our Answering the Skeptics episode, the moon is presently retreating farther and farther away from the Earth. The process is understood, and the retreat has been measured for decades. Now, obviously, if the moon is getting farther and farther away from Earth, if you go backwards in time, the moon gets closer and closer. Well, if you do the math, then the moon would have been touching the Earth a mere 1.6 billion years ago. But the moon and Earth are supposed to be 4 billion years old, according to the theories of deep time and naturalistic processes. Obviously, there's a problem here. So the skeptics responded that somehow, some way, the recession rate of the moon was slower in the past. In other words, the moon wasn't closer to Earth in the past. Now, this was claimed even though there's absolutely no justification for saying this, other than they are trying to salvage their billions of years. The skeptics quoted evidence from varves in lakes. For those of you who do not remember this, varves are very fine layers of silt that settle in a lake bed. It is presumed that one layer gets laid down per year, so many varves found in the rock record are interpreted to mean millions of years, and some have even claimed to be able to tell tidal effects on those varves. Well, tides are caused by the moon. So, if you can see what they're getting at, the skeptics claimed that they could calculate how far away the moon was in the past by looking at the varves in the rock record. Not so fast. As we showed in episode 9, it had been discovered that catastrophic floods could produce thousands of these varves in hours. There is no millions of years involved here. And while you had variation within these varves, well, it's pretty obvious that the distance between Earth and Moon hadn't changed much in a few hours while these varves were being laid down. Furthermore, as Spike Passeris pointed out, Mazumdar and Arima examined the work of those who had examined varves in trying to deduce the distance to the Moon many moons ago. Using the same data, they found that you could get incredible variation in numbers. In fact, depending on how you calculated it, you could get estimated distances to the moon in the past which were larger than today. Now, this is impossible. So clearly trying to determine the distance to the moon in the past using varves just doesn't work. So the researchers of the Moon Magnetic Field paper struggled to explain how the moon could have a magnetic field at all, let alone such a strong one for so long. They speculated that maybe the moon had a molten core, like Earth, and that convection currents within that molten core produced the magnetic field. Now, this is called the dynamo theory. Now, in order to help the currents in the molten core, the researchers took a complete about-face on the skeptics and their arguments, and instead argued that the moon was closer to Earth. Now, of course, how the researchers calculated the age of the moon rocks and the age of the magnetism stored within them was done using the potassium-argon dating method on the rocks. Now, we've discussed the various rock dating methods before in Crevo Rant number 100 and on this show. And interestingly, just recently we answered a viewer's question about polonium halos. Back in the 70s, Dr. Robert Gentry had published a paper in Science magazine showing radio halos in coal. The coal was Jurassic in evolutionary age, supposedly some 175 million years old, and it came from the Colorado Plateau. But as Dr. Gentry showed, samples from the Jurassic, Triassic, and Eocene periods, which is supposed to represent a time span of 37 to 245 million years ago, Gentry showed that in actuality, it didn't represent millions of years at all, but it all happened at the same time a few thousand years ago. But in 1969, potassium-argon dating was run on lava flows that were on top of these layers, which we now know were only a few thousand years old. So those potassium-argon dates ran between 61 and 84 million years old. Well, obviously the rocks that we know are only a few thousand years old had to be there before the lava could flow down on top of it. So therefore, we know that the potassium-argon age of the lava is just plain wrong. Furthermore, geologist Steve Austin used the potassium-argon dating method on rocks from Mount St. Helens that we knew were only 10 years old. And he had ages returned of 340,000 years old. Clearly, the potassium-argon dating method is unreliable, to say the least. Now, these are certainly not the only examples we could provide. So, in assessing the moon's past magnetic field, Suave et al. Relied upon the dates given the rocks by the potassium-argon dating method to conclude that the moon's magnetic field was recent. Now, on their timescale of billions of years, yeah, it sure was recent. But here's the thing. The conventional naturalistic models simply cannot explain the moon's magnetic field. At all. You recall in past episodes we discussed the power of a scientific theory's ability to make a prediction. Well, when it comes to a scientific theory, its most powerful ability is its predictive power, not explanatory power. Dr. Russell Humphreys had composed a theory of origin of planetary magnetic fields, which was based on the biblical account of creation. He asked the question, if creation were true, what would the evidence be? He then proposed a model based upon creation. If God created the planets, he could have created them with the original atoms having their nuclear spin axes pointing in the same direction. The many magnetic fields of the atoms, all lining up, would be converted within seconds into a large electrical current within the planet, producing the electromagnetic field of the planet. The magnetic field would be strong at creation and would weaken over time. Now, based on this principle and the assumption that the planets were only 6,000 years old, Humphreys predicted the magnetic fields of multiple planets, which at that time had not yet been measured. He published his predictions in 1984 in a Creation Research Society quarterly paper. Since that time, 5 out of 6 of his predictions have been fulfilled, while 5 out of 6 predictions made by evolutionary theories have failed miserably. We will find out about the 6th prediction in 2015 when the New Horizons spacecraft finally visits Pluto. Now, of course, Dr. Humphreys' model explains exactly why the moon had an electromagnetic field in the past, but does not have one now. He also has a paper coming out at the International Conference on Creationism, being held in Pittsburgh this summer, in which he is dealing with the many major problems of dynamo theories. Now, with regards to this present paper on the moon's magnetic field, Dr. Humphreys wrote, "It assumes that a dynamo, a natural electric generator process, was possible for the moon, when it appears that a dynamo is impossible even for the Earth, which rotates 30 times faster and has a core over 50 times larger. The next ICC has accepted a paper by me reviewing the nearly 1 century of failure to make dynamo theories work. Using the central equations of dynamo theory, I was surprised to find out that A, the Earth's core is orders of magnitude below the threshold where a dynamo might work. B, nobody has published numerical estimates of the key parameters for the Earth. Question, are the numbers too discouraging? And C, no dynamo theorist can say, because their theory is not good enough, whether or not a current laboratory experiment that is a good magnetic simulation of Earth's core should show dynamo action. After a year of operation, the experimenters have reported no dynamo action. The creation explanation, on the other hand, is simple. Because the moon's core is so small, the created field died out within centuries, the decay time being proportional to the core radius squared. So rocks formed early in the moon's 6,000-year history recorded a strong field, whereas rocks formed after a millennium or so recorded a weak field. Now the moon has zero field. See my December 1984 CRSQ article for details. So in all of this, we see that the rock dating methods, giving ages of billions of years, simply do not work. The moon's magnetic field and decay cannot be explained within naturalistic deep time models. The moon's origin cannot be explained by naturalistic deep time models. However, all of it is not only easily explained and understood within the young universe creation paradigm, it is actually fit into predictions made decades ago by young Earth creationists. David Koppich ran an excellent article on his blog, Creation Evolution Headlines, a blog which I just have to highly recommend. I enjoyed David's writings very much. David had posted a timely article entitled How Students Should Deal with Evolution Evangelists. Now, especially you students out there, this is a must-read article. It's interesting that only the week before, Kevin Hartnett had written an article in the Brainiac section of the Boston Globe regarding certain evolution evangelists trying to push for more evolution to be taught in medical school. Now, for you longtime viewers, you'll remember our interviews with people like Dr. Jerry Bergman, who teaches at the medical college and has written books about the negative impact evolutionism has had on science and the medical profession in particular. Geneticist Dr. Kevin Anderson also mentioned several points of hindrance that evolutionism has caused for genetics research. Now, as quoted in the Boston Globe article, Dr. Nesi explains, "A doctor who has a deep foundation in evolution will think different about disease." Now, of course, we here at Genesis Week emphatically agree. And that's just the point. Evolutionism alters your thinking and thus hinders scientific research, and in particular, medical research. Dr. Bergman's book on vestigial organs is a classic example. So many organs in the human body were deemed vestigial. That is, they were claimed to be useless leftovers from our evolutionary ascent. Organs like the appendix, which we now know has many functions, which is why doctors are now a little more hesitant to remove it. But before, doctors were very quick to remove it, because after all, it was a useless leftover. And because after all, we evolved, and the appendix is nothing more than a useless leftover, no one went looking for the purpose of the appendix. The creationary mindset, however, would say, well, it's there. We were created with purpose, therefore that organ must have been created with purpose. I wonder what that purpose would be. This leads to investigation and discovery, unlike evolutionism, which is truly a science stopper. Another classic example is the tonsils. Again, originally believed to be a useless leftover by evolutionism, tonsils were removed from people en masse. Evolutionism hindered both the discovery of the purpose of the tonsils and had a devastating effect on the lives of countless numbers of people who contracted polio after having their tonsils removed. As it turned out, the tonsils played a role in fending off polio. Those who had had their tonsils removed suffered devastating consequences from the polio, while those who had intact tonsils simply recovered from the polio. As Dr. Anderson and others pointed out, evolutionism prompted many to categorize the majority of DNA as junk DNA. Because some 90% of the DNA had an unknown purpose, and evolutionism would expect there to be a lot of useless leftover DNA, many followed that path. I mean, why would they look for purpose in purposeless DNA? This is what evolutionism would lead to. Now, of course, with the ENCODE project, pretty much all of the DNA has intricate, multi-layered purpose. It is also intertwined that one has to ask how any of it could exist without other portions. In other words, the DNA could not evolve one small step at a time. But if it were designed, then it makes complete sense. If your DNA and organs were designed with purpose, then so were you. You should be asking what purpose that creator would have for you. Stick around, we'll be right back after this short break.
This show sponsored in part by Canada's first permanent creation museum in the heart of Alberta's dinosaur beds, the Big Valley Creation Science Museum, bbcsm.com. And by GenesisPark.com, where you can get your own beautiful hardcover copy of the Chronicles of Dinosauria, the history and mystery of dinosaurs and man, now available from New Leaf Publishing.
Funny, fast, and furious. Ian's Crevo rants cover a multitude of topics in an easy-to-understand comical way. Complicated subjects that normally make your brain hurt a lot less when Ian explains them, while wearing his anti-government mind-reading equipment. Have questions about carbon-14 dating, natural selection, thermodynamics, or what on earth is he doing there? 3 volumes of rants on DVD. Take your pick for $15 each, plus shipping and handling, or order all 3 as a package and save yourself $10. Order online today at Ian's Bookstore. for me?
You'll recall last week we briefly mentioned a spectacular find in Alberta of actual dinosaur skin. Now, this, of course, is only one example in a very long line of preserved soft tissues in the rock record, but a fun one. YouTuber Invoker12 wrote in, they even say in the article they want to figure out how the 70 million year old fossil stayed intact. How the fossil stayed intact because it is a fossil in. Man, you manipulate so much that these sheep follow you so well. Is your bank account getting bigger in? I sure hope so, because when you're found out to be this big liar, my friend, you will not get another dime. Oh wait, that's right. You will always find someone to believe the, expletive deleted, you're selling. Well, I'll ignore the typical anti-creationist rantings, except, of course, pointing out the astonishing presumption and accusing me of lying. When you publicly accuse someone else of lying, and that accusation is false, then by definition that makes you the liar. You didn't give me the possibility that I may simply have misunderstood or make a mistake. You also didn't leave open the possibility that you misunderstood or made a mistake, which, as everyone will see, you obviously did. Let's take a look at the article to see what they have to say about this fossilized dinosaur skin. Now, first of all, if it's considered to be very old, then it is simply called a fossil, whether it is fossilized or not. For example, the Berezovka mammoth, found in the frozen tundras of Siberia, was so well preserved that its last mouthful of food was identifiable in its mouth and its stomach. The hair and the flesh was all still there, yet it is called a fossil. The fossil trees of Axel Heiberg Island in the Canadian High Arctic can be cut with a handsaw and burned. I have pieces of this wood in my museum, which is presently on display at the Cornwall Creation Science Centre. Notice what Philip Curie, former curator of the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller and the past president of the Society for Vertebrate Paleontology, had to say about fossils in Alaska. A more spectacular example was found on the north slope of Alaska, where many thousands of bones lack any significant degree of permineralization. The bones look and feel like old cow bones, and the discoverers of the site did not report it for 20 years because they assumed they were bison, not dinosaur bones. So obviously the term fossil is a loose term indeed. So what exactly is the present fossil dinosaur skin then? Well, the clues as to what exactly the researchers found come from the article itself, and even in what Invoker inadvertently admitted. They're trying to figure out how the 70 million year old fossil stayed intact. Well, if it was a rock fossil, they wouldn't be asking that question now, would they? I mean, do you realize how many fossils made of rock there are on planet Earth? I mean, it's billions upon billions. Nobody is asking how those rocks stayed preserved for millions of years. However, if the dinosaur skin was, in fact, skin, well, then yeah, they should be asking how on earth skin remained intact for 70 million years. The answer is obvious and simple. It can't. So therefore, we can safely conclude that this dinosaur skin is not 70 million years old. Notice what they said in the article about the dinosaur skin. We have no idea what the skin looks like. Is it green, blue, orange? There has been some research that proved the color of some dinosaur feathers, but never skin. Skin has fat and lots of dead cells, along with many inorganic compounds. And most importantly, Barbai said this is only the third three-dimensional dinosaur skin specimen ever found worldwide. Now, wait a minute. I've had the privilege of studying three-dimensional dinosaur skin. Now, while it is quite rare, there's a lot more than 3 examples that have been found. Just in the creationary community alone, Creation Evidence Museum has a piece in its collection. The Glendive Dinosaur and Fossil Museum just uncovered a hadrosaur with 3-dimensionally preserved fossil skin on their dig site. Visit the Tucson Fossil and Mineral Show. There's been lots of fossilized dinosaur skin found. Obviously, Barbai is not talking about 3-dimensionally preserved stone dinosaur skin. because there's a lot more than 3 examples found. He's talking about something very special. Mummified skin. Presumably permineralized, which just means it's coated and permeated by rock, but the skin is obviously still there, or else they wouldn't be saying what they are. This is the same situation with dinosaur bones. As we mentioned repeatedly on this show, when it comes to dinosaur bones, the bone is still there. It's been coated and permeated by rock, but the bone is still there. That's how we're able to do carbon-14 tests on dinosaur bones, which always return ages magnitudes smaller than the alleged millions of years attributed to the dinosaurs. In fact, as we pointed out on this show previously, some dinosaur bones have come back with carbon-14 ages that were younger than the carbon-14 ages returned on Neanderthal skeletons. It all points to the dinosaurs being very, very young. And if the dinosaurs are young, then I think you would have to agree that also means the Earth is young. Exactly as the Bible says. Press Abort wrote in, Ian Juby does not build rockets and fly them to the moon. Therefore, by his very definition, he is a non-human ape. I'm thinking you kind of missed my point. Especially in light of the fact that I also referred to engineering, math, and art, all of which I have done, and apes do not. I was once deemed too contaminated to date. We'll pray for you, Mr. Manoel. This is getting boring. Another brilliant show. God bless you, Ian. Once again, you have encouraged me in my faith in God. When I see the world, the Bible makes sense, but you have a talent for taking the specifics of the science world, explaining them, and giving all the glory to our Creator. Way to go, Ian. Another quality episode. Thanks so much to all of you who took time to write in and let us know you watched the show. Almost every single one of you even went farther than that to write an encouraging note. So thank you so much. Well, let's wrap this up for today. I'm your host, Ian Juby, signing off for now. Remember, you can send in your comments, questions, feedback, and the deeds to all your properties, too. Comments at GenesisWeek.com, or you can send us a tweet at GenesisWeek, or you can go to GenesisWeek.com, which is our YouTube channel, find the most recent video, and post a comment there. Or you can drop in on our Facebook page and leave a comment there. Thanks for watching, and we'll remind you of those words spoken by our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. We'll see you on the flip side.
We are a viewer-supported program and need your support to keep this program on the air. Please pray for us, and if you wish to financially support the program, Canadians can make a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, K2K 2P4. While we cannot offer tax-deductible receipts outside of Canada, donors wishing to financially support the program can do so online at ianjuby.org/donations, and thank you for your support.